So we've got 5 goals in 5 games. That includes 3 against Luton, and quite frankly, it seemed very sparse other than that. We've been missing chances against some very easy teams that we've been playing so far this season, and tactically it just feels like we're not clicking. And I think what worries me the most at the moment is the fact that we only scored 38 goals across the entire season last year, and we don't want a repeat of that. But there are some green shoots of positivity here, and if you stick around to the end of the video, I'm going to solve our goal scoring problem completely. So yeah, strap in. Chelsea, look, if you want to give me a job, I'm available on a consultancy basis. I'm more than happy to help. But first, what we need to do is go through where it's going wrong. So the first thing I want to talk about is XG. Basically, the XG says that we should have scored more. Now, if you look at this table right now that I've got on screen, it's going to show the XG charts, and it puts us in 4th. We're currently in 14th. Something just doesn't quite add up, right? So what it shows is that we should have scored 5 more goals than we currently have. And XG is a really interesting marker here. It obviously doesn't give the full picture of the points on the board. But what it does show is that we're getting in the right goal scoring areas, but we're not converting our chances. And that's worrying. And if you look at that table, overall, we're about 4.5 points worse off than where we should be this season. But how much weight you put on this, I'm not really that sure. Like, if you look at some of Potter's data when he was Chelsea manager, we were right up there with XG, but again, we weren't getting the points. So let's get into a couple of players right now and look at where the XG deficit is and why we're not converting the chances. So what I'll do is I'll pull up a player-by-player run-through of the XG stats for Chelsea Football Club. The one that I want to talk about first is Nicholas Jackson. So yeah, this guy underperforms his XG. He's about 3 goals under where he should be. And I think back to chances like the one against Bournemouth. There was also a glaring one against Forest as well. There are opportunities that he should have scored and he hasn't slotted it. But I don't think you can completely blame this guy, right? The good news is he's getting in the right positions. He should eventually get up to that XG number. Like, he should start outperforming his XG over time. That's just the way the data works. He wants to be getting in behind, running onto chances and slowing it home using his pace. And at the moment, I just don't think we're doing that. And more on that in a little bit. And look, goals should be spread across the entire team, right? You look at Enzo, for example. He's another one on this table that I think is statistically quite interesting. He underperforms his XG by 2 goals. So again, he should have scored 2 goals. He doesn't have a goal or an assist right now. Yes, he missed a penalty against West Ham. And how different that game could have been if we were 2-1 up. We would have probably won that game, let's be honest. And then again, we're looking at a very different state of play if we beat West Ham, use that confidence to then play against teams like Forest and Bournemouth. Maybe the season so far could have hung on that key moment. So that is a very interesting one. And again, Enzo is the darling child of Chelsea fans right now. I love him. I think he's performed very, very well. But if he's not scoring goals and getting assists, that is a worrying state of affairs for him. So again, maybe Pochettino is getting an arm around this guy and sort of going, you need to convert some of these chances, or you need to get some assists. Or maybe what I suggest Enzo should be doing is dropping slightly further back and maybe letting someone like Gallagher, Cole Palmer get in the number 10 role and use their attacking flair to win opportunities and get goals. And look, I think what this shows is that you can't just rely on a number 9 to get goals anymore. You need to spread the opportunities out throughout the entire team. Yes, Man City have Haaland. Yes, Spurs last year had players like Harry Kane. I think it was something like 75% of their goals came from Harry Kane, which is just an insane amount, right? But then look at them this season. A lot more different goal scorers. They're looking more functional, even as a team, more so than they did last year. So again, we've got to get players like Sterling, like Noni Madueke, like Cole Palmer, like Enzo even, Gallagher, getting in the penalty area and scoring goals. I'll tell you what's another really interesting one, and one that I've been paying a lot of attention to this season because I think it's an outlier really, is shots. We haven't been taking a lot of shots, it feels like, in games, and we're kind of, I don't know, trying to like overplay it at times, and it just seems like we're just trying to make one pass more than we need to. And I think if you look at the shots per 90 table, you're looking at it here, and only Sterling, Jackson and Enzo have over 2 shots per 90 in the game. And that's just not enough, is it? Like, obviously we don't just want our players shooting from every position all around the pitch outside the penalty area, because that just doesn't work in the modern game. You need to play it around and create spaces, especially when we are facing the low blocks, because ultimately the shots will just get blocked. But we need to stop overplaying, right? We can't just have shots coming in from the centre from Jackson and cutting in from the right hand side from Sterling. We need to see it from the left hand side. We need to see our centre mids taking some shots as well. And I do think that if we start putting the goalkeepers that we're playing under a bit more pressure, we might get a few more spillages. Jackson might be able to get in and get a very simple tap in. And the only other thing that I sort of say here is that obviously the XG table says that we should be right up there. there. But if you look at our fixtures, we should really be right up there in terms of the Premier League. And really, we should have had a lot more points. Like, we've had a relatively easy run in so far. We've got a relatively hard set of games coming up. So to be in this position is kind of what I expect. What I'm worried about now is that in the big games, we still will create chances, but are we actually going to convert them? And if this trend carries on going until December, January this year, there's going to be a lot of pressure on our young players. And so really now we need to focus, and Poch needs to drill this more than anything, is about getting shots, getting quality chances, and bagging some goals, because if we're not, then it's looking a bit worrying. The next area that I want to look at is our passing, and I had a look at the big chances created. We've only created 3 big chances in the entire Premier League this season, and we've actually missed 2.4 of those. So overall, what I'm seeing in the data here is that we're not making enough opportunities for our strikers to score. It is as simple as that. And I think this is really where a lot of Chelsea fans are getting annoyed more than anything with the team selections. You've got players like Colwill playing in a left-hand side role. You've got Chilwell as a left winger. Overall, it means that we're not really creating enough chances in the final third. And I think what we're seeing more than anything is that we're creating a lot of shots, which is pushing the XG numbers up. But those shots are not quality, and the chances that we're not creating are not good enough. So why is that? I think I really miss the one-touch play that we saw in pre-season. I remember some of those games, the game against Brighton, Mudryk to Jackson, then Mudryk slaps it, bottom corner, beautiful volley. For me, I haven't really seen too much of that really in the Premier League so far. And this has to come from the engine room. It has to come from midfield. We have to be popping balls into Jackson, letting him do the one-touch play, give it to a winger, give it back, and then progress through the lines that way. And we aren't really getting in behind teams either. You look at our team, so much of it is based on pace. Sterling, Mudryk, Jackson, all of those guys, super, super quick, want to be getting the ball over the top and running into it. And ideally, really sort of showing the afterburners to defenders rather than having to sort of play tiki-taka around them. And it's not all about incisive passes. You can't just expect Enzo to just whip out a worldy pass every single time. Conor Gallagher, again, that's not his specialty. And then if Ugachukwu plays, again, he's not necessarily known for that either. And Caicedo isn't. So for me, it's about drawing players onto you. Colwill did a really interesting interview last year when he was at Brighton about how the manager there was telling him to hold on to the ball, to slow the game down, to get the press onto us. And unfortunately, what this is going to mean for us is that we're going to have to see a lot more playing out of the back. And maybe that's where we're going to allow a few chances against the teams that we're going to be playing against. But we need to be drawing the players in. We need to be getting players closer to Sanchez, closer to Colwill, Thiago Silva, Disasi if he's playing. And we need to get them onto us so the midfield pushes on. There's a gap in between each of those lines with the attackers and the midfielders, and then the defence has to come higher up, because that's ultimately the only way we get through a low block, which is what I want to talk about next. There's been a lot of chat about low blocks, hasn't there? So what I did is I looked at our last set of games. I've kind of discounted Luton because you kind of know that Luton are going to have to play a low block against Chelsea at home. But you look at some of the other teams that we've faced, Bournemouth, Forest, West Ham, and then Liverpool is another really, really interesting one here. And I'll pull up some average position charts here that we can go through. And you look at how they've set up against us. I think all of them, bar Liverpool, have set up in a low block. And so what I wanted to do is just go through each one of them. So let's look at Bournemouth first. I think what I noticed with them was that they only had 4 players north of the halfway line, right? They were very vertically compact. There wasn't a lot of space between the defence and the number 9, for example. Sarri talked about this a lot when he was at Chelsea, about how he wanted 15 yards almost. That was a crazy, low amount of space in between each of those lines. And we're seeing teams more and more now go for that very compact system. It's not about being always so deep that they're sort of right next to the goalkeeper. It's about having lines close together so you can't play through them as well. So you can see there that their manager has set up their team incredibly well, and that's why we didn't score a goal. You look at Forest next, they only had 1 player further forward than the halfway line. You can see they were incredibly deep. And you know that they had a game plan, and it worked completely well. And that's how they scored the goal, and that's how they won the game. And we need to be more tactically advanced and more mature in the way that we're setting up, because teams know that we're going to play this way. We want to play expansive football. All they need to do is sit behind and get a counter-attack. And we're going to see it more and more. West Ham, for example, they did it incredibly well. They had 3 players further forward than the halfway line, but they had a sending off, so you can see why they dropped back. Don't think it's fair to just sort of go like, oh, all of these teams are playing old school football and that we're the ones that are the best team and we should be beating them by a mile. They've got a setup, it works for them, and that's why West Ham got the win, and you have to credit them for that. The one that's really interesting is Liverpool as well. Like, I was looking at the setup there. You have 4 players north of the halfway line, but the DM and the wide players, they are really, really advanced, aren't they? And you look at Trent and his position, he was inverting. We know that he's going to be inverting, but it's sort of, he is further forward than that defensive line. And Robertson on the left-hand side also was similar. And they didn't have a guy that sort of dropped in from the midfield to form an effective back three. They were very open. And, you know, when you watch that game, it felt like a very open game, didn't it? And perhaps that's one of the games that we played best so far this season. And then while we're still on average positions, let's look at our setup. Colwill is the one that I want to pull out first. We know that he is a centre-back. He's playing in a left-back role, but he is no means a marauding left wing-back. Macaulay and Mudryk on the left-hand side didn't have an overlap, didn't have an underlap, didn't have players to play passes off either. And that's why we look a bit anemic on that left-hand side. And really, when I was talking earlier on about like getting goals from different areas, that's an area that I feel that we are really missing out on at the moment, like goals from that left hand side. Noni Madueke could be an interesting one when he's fully fit and ready to go there, but more than anything, I think Mudryk does deserve it. Like, he is creating chances, he is getting opportunities that then lead to shots, which the data kind of shows, so I think he should be playing more often in that role. Let's give him a run of games now. And then Enzo isn't as high as I thought he would be either, and I looked at some of the screenshots here from the Bournemouth game. He wasn't supporting Jackson in the way that I thought he was going to. It was actually more Gallagher that was that higher role. And we've been talking quite a lot about how Gallagher is one of those ones that was the deepest ones. He's meant to be breaking up play. He's had so many tackles, etc., right? But Gallagher felt in that game against Bournemouth that he was the most advanced. And what I'm worried about at the moment is that we are kind of playing players in slightly unusual positions. They're not really used to it. And we aren't really playing in a number 10 properly either. And so we aren't really getting that like creativity that we need. And the last one I'll sort of talk about here is that Sterling obviously wants to be as narrow as he possibly can and close to Jackson. You can see that here. He's basically like on top of Jackson, isn't it? Which I'm not angry about. Like, I want Jackson to have like a player to pass off. And if that's the right winger, that's fine. That means we can actually play free in the middle. But what it does mean is that that right wing back, he has to form the width on the right hand side. There's so much interest here about our average positions, but what I want to do now is like, how would I solve this problem? How would I set up our team going forward to be able to bag some more goals in and ultimately have a more sort of like cohesive team? Ben Chilwell. He's the first one. I want a left back, I want a left wing back, and I want them properly advancing up the pitch. The interesting one here is like, do you want him as an overlapping wing back or an underlapping wing back? Because they're very different setups. I think Mudryk wants to be a wing-hugging winger, and I think he wants to be as wide as he possibly can. So that means my direction to Chilwell would be to underlap with him. Let Mudryk stay out wide. Chilwell comes in the half space between the centre-back and the right-back, and then they play 1-2s off each other so that Mudryk can use his pace, get in behind, get to the bylines and get crosses over. I really do think that one of the biggest misses of the game against Bournemouth was that Gallagher chance where Mudryk runs to the byline, cuts it back, and Gallagher, for me, should have scored. So I want to see more of that. And again, I was looking at the data. Mudryk has 3 key passes per 90, being one of our best so far this season. And so if that's not a reason to start him, then I don't know what is. Next thing is the centre-backs and the passing range. We need to have some centre-backs that can break through those low block lines. For me, it's really, really simple now, especially if you've got Chilwell on the left-hand side, you've got Gusto or Reece James on the right. Let's have some 2 proper ball-playing centre-backs that are incredibly adept on the ball. For me, that is very simple. It's Colwill and it's Thiago Silva. Both those guys are so adept at playing balls through the lines. That's how we're going to have to set up. And before I leave that point, let's not forget about Badiashile as well. When he comes back, for me, he was one of our best in that role. Now, this isn't FIFA, right? You can't just have attacking players on attacking players. I've set us up in quite an attacking way at the moment, haven't I? I've got Mudryk playing, who should be an out-and-out attacker. Like, I don't really want him to be worrying about the defensive play. And I've just said I want Gusto pushing on. So you're like, come on, Josh, we've got Colwill and Thiago Silva. Thiago's 39. Now, I've got a solution for that, and it's Leslie Ugo Chukwu. This guy can be the defensive heart of our team from the midfield. He can drop in from the defensive midfielder position in between the centre backs to form that effective back three, which is so important now in modern football. But what that means is that you're going to have to drop a Gallagher or a Caicedo. And for me, I can just see Chelsea making a very easy decision here. They've spent the money on Caicedo. Enzo is one of our best players, if not our best player. So we're obviously not going to drop him. So the one that I can see missing out long term, especially if we do play a 4-3-3, which I think is kind of our most functional system right now, is Gallagher. So I'll be interested to see what you think, guys. Like, do you think that Gallagher has a future at Chelsea in the number 10 role or even in the midfield for us? Or because of this contractual situation, can you see him just heading out the door and leaving even as soon as January? My last solution that I'll put out is striker rotation. We haven't really had the opportunity to do that at the moment because Broja's been injured, right? But I think Jackson could really do with games where he is coming off the bench and using his pace, bringing in Broja from the start, using his physicality, wear down teams, boss them. And I've said it on Joe's show, and I mean this, I honestly do think Jackson could be an option from the left-hand side. And maybe that's why we're looking at number 9 options in January, and maybe that's why we're going to end up with Tony being our number 9 going forward. That'd be a really interesting one to keep our eyes on. But that's how we're going to solve Chelsea's goal scoring drought. I honestly do think that those small changes will make a big difference for us going forward in the rest of the season, and I do still believe that we can have a good season if we just start banging the goals in. But yeah, like, let me know in the comments below, like, what do you think of that tactical setup? Do you think that actually will result into more goals? Is it a little bit too attacking? I'm really interested to see what you guys think, so let me know. So thank you so much for watching this video. If you want to watch more from me, check out the latest video on the Kickoff channel, which was all about Chelsea, our status, how we're setting up at the moment. And if you want to support the channel, head over to Aveste, the home of independent streetwear, my clothing brand. There's a top there that I want you guys to check out. It's a Saintloco Chelsea blue t-shirt. It's absolutely brilliant. I wore it recently on the Joey Knight podcast and it is quality. So yeah, check that one out, and thank you so much for watching this video. I really appreciate it, and I'll speak to you very soon.